Hi there, my name's Nicoll, and for this short lesson, I thought I would give a brief introduction to the topic of cancer. So firstly, when we're talking about cancer, we have to first ask, what is cancer? Well, cancer is a disease. And what we mean by the term disease is an abnormal condition that can infect an organism's body, organs, tissues, or their cells. So what causes cancer? Well, cancer is caused when our DNA is mutated. So DNA, this chemical here, is present in every cell of our body, and it contains the instructions to make everything that a living organism needs to survive. And DNA is made up of really short segments of thousands of genes, which you've probably heard of before. And each gene contains the instructions for a specific characteristic, so hair colour or eye colour. So these instructions are written as a very specific sequence of molecules within the DNA called bases. But to make things easier, we name them by letters. So for instance, here we have the sequence AAA-ATG. And to grow, our cells have to replicate all this DNA. They have to copy it to make new cells so that we get bigger. But just like us, the cells can make mistakes when they're copying the DNA, and they can get the sequence a bit wrong. So for example, here, instead of inserting a C, the cell has accidentally put a T in the sequence. And this tiny, tiny change is what we call a mutation. And although these mutations are tiny, can happen in just one cell of the millions in your body, they can have huge effects on the cells. So sometimes this one little mutation within one cell causes that specific cell to be able to grow and divide really rapidly and to become immortal. So if a cell is immortal, what we mean by that is that it doesn't die. And cells, just like humans do, when they get old, they should die. But these cells don't, so they can keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing forever. But when they've grown so much, they start to form almost a ball shape, and we call that a tumour. So for example, you can see here that we have normal cells. This is what they normally look like. And one single cell has started to grow so rapidly and copy itself and copy itself and copy itself to form a ball called a tumour. And this tumour can keep growing and growing and growing because the cells don't die. And at that point, it's called the disease cancer. So there are many different types of cancer, and we name them after the part of the body that the tumours, these little balls of cells, are growing in. So for example, you might have heard of lung cancer. That's a tumour like this growing within your lungs. So some things put us more at risk of getting a particular type of cancer, and we call chemicals or compounds that increase our likelihood of getting cancer carcinogens. And they do this by increasing the likelihood of our DNA becoming mutated or our DNA sequence getting a bit wrong. So an example of this is cigarette smoke. So cigarette smoke contains chemicals that can directly change the sequence of the DNA in our lungs when we breathe it in. And that is caused a mutation. So we can say that smoking increases our risk of getting lung cancer because it's increasing the likelihood of some of our sequences being wrong. Another example is UV rays from the sun. They can also cause mutations or changes to the sequence of the DNA when we don't protect our skin with sun cream. So intense exposure to the sun can increase our risk of getting skin cancer. But how do we treat cancer? Well, we treat cancer using what's called chemotherapy. And chemotherapy means killing with chemicals. That's all it means. So treating cancer is particularly difficult though, because if you think about it, the cancerous tumour cells have come from our own normal cells. So it's really hard to get a treatment that will be able to distinguish between the cancerous cells and your normal body cells. So what we do in cancer research is we look for new treatments for cancer by trying to find very small differences between the cancer cells and the body's own cells that we can target to kill just the cancer cells and not the normal cells. But at the moment, it's very difficult. So in chemotherapy, what we do is we try and stop the cells dividing and replicating because we damage their DNA very badly. And as I said at the start, DNA requires all the instructions for a cell or an organism to live. So without the DNA, the cell can't live. But the problem is that the chemotherapy treatment damages the DNA of not only the cancerous cells, but also our own normal healthy cells. So how do we get around this? We kind of have to come to a bit of a compromise. So the cancer cells are growing so much quicker than our normal cells. So they're more affected by the chemotherapy because we're damaging the DNA to stop them from growing. So what we get is we kill all the tumour cells, hopefully, by stopping them growing so quickly, but we only kill or damage some of our normal body cells because they're not growing as quick, so they're not as susceptible to the treatment. So to finish, let's give a quick summary of this very brief introduction to cancer. So cancer is a disease and it's caused by mutations in our DNA. These mutations can cause our cells to grow very quickly and form tumours. Carcinogens increase our risk of getting cancer by causing DNA mutations. And we use chemotherapy to treat cancer, but this also harms our body's normal cells. So in cancer research, we try and find very small differences between the cancer cells and our normal cells to target, and that will allow us to treat cancer without making us poorly ourselves. Thanks.